Hi, everyone. I am so excited because I am speaking with author Zoe Howe, and we are talking about Stevie Nicks today. And I'm so excited. Her book was called Stevie Nicks Visions, Dreams, and Rumors. And it came out in 2014, which is like all of a sudden seems so long ago, but not that long ago. But it does seem right? Doesn't that seem so long ago now?
It does. We were living in another world then.
I know it does. It feels like we've aged a lot in this very long year. What I love about it is that when I heard from you this week or last week, Zoe, it was the exact day that I heard that Lindsey Buckingham and his wife were getting divorced.
Oh my God, that's so weird.
Isn't that crazy? And I was like, whoa, I get to read because I'd already read your book, but I read it again because who cares? I needed to read it again. And I was like, wow, I'm going to read that Stevie Nicks book again. And Lindsey Buckingham, who's been married to that woman for 20 years. And so everybody was like, oh, I wonder if, and then I was going to say to Zoe, because I get to talk to you, why do we do that? Why can't we let it go? They are in their 70s now, okay? Why can we not let go the fantasy that nobody gets to die unless Lindsay and Stevie get back together? Like nobody gets to leave until that happens.
Absolutely. It's the ultimate rock and roll fairy tale romance, isn't it? Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham, and it's amazing. I mean, when I was researching for the book, I kind of found so many, I'm sure you've seen them yourself, so many kind of like Tumblr blogs dedicated just to the idea that Stevie and Lindsay might get back together again. It was almost like they were trying to manifest it by kind of creating a vision board of Stevie and Lindsay. And it's just like it's like, one of rock and roll's true fairy tales. And I think people, as you say, it is a fantasy. It's like we're in a fantasy relationship with the idea that
Yes.
Lindsay and Stevie will, because all those songs were kind of written for each other. And I think, there was certainly an element of theatre and kind of playing up to the fact that everybody still wants that for them. And they've moved on with their lives in it romantically, obviously, but there is still that thing. And on stage, I know Stevie Nicks has said it herself. On stage, we have this thing, and then when we leave the stage and the show's over, we go back to our lives and our relationships or whatever. But yeah, it's a romance, and I think there isn't enough romance in life now, and I think we cling to those rather kind of poetic stories of romance and fantasy and what if. We don't have enough of that in the world anymore, so maybe that's why we're still kind of a bit obsessed.
Yeah, and since they wrote songs about each other that we hear on the radio, I mean, and we're just like, they can't move on because we can't move on from their songs, okay? Like, so it's like they're stuck in this perpetual relationship that I'm happy it's not me and one of my exes. Your book was so well researched. Everyone, if you want to read a Stevie Nicks book, like this is the one because I have read a lot. I even read Mick Fleetwood's book back way long ago when his whole I think that's what got me started on reading books about them was his initial book. But when I came to your book, I was like, wow, your research was incredible. How did you get those details? I mean, serious details that I did not know from the other books that you had about her life.
Well, thank you for saying that. That means an awful lot to me because, I know that there's so much that Stevie fans are very serious about Stevie Nicks. And, I kind of was very aware that Stevie fans are very knowledgeable. Fleetwood Mac fans, they really kind of, they're very devoted. And I didn't want to just do another book that essentially presented with them with the same stuff that they already knew, just in a sort of slightly repackaged way. And of course, there are stories in there that are familiar. But it meant a lot to me to kind of go as deep as I could. And I think a big part of that was, although it is an unauthorized biography, so there was a limit to the sort of the number of people in the inner circle that I could speak to or have any assistance from, which is fine, understood. I did have a few really wonderful interviews with some great people who had worked with Stevie, producers like Rupert Hine, who sadly passed away not that long ago, and also Keith Olsen, who's also no longer with us, and also sort of various people who'd worked with her in a sort of songwriting capacity as well. And those people very generous with their time and what they shared with me for the book. And I made it very clear, this is a celebration. This is a celebratory book. This is not a kind of a pulling apart of someone. And I think they just sort of understood that, and so they kind of shared their memories, and it just added another dimension to a story that many of us in some respects know quite well, but it had this sort of inside information element as well. You could always go further, and I sort of you try. I mean, I would have loved to have spoken to Stevie herself for this book, of course, and I tried, and I didn't. Just in case anyone's like, why didn't you speak to Stevie? It's like, it's that easy. I certainly tried, but I didn't get a no. So there were the management was aware that I was doing this, and I thought, well, all I can do then is I will proceed, but in the most respectful way that I can. That's how I write anyway. I would never do anything otherwise. It would always come from a place of love, and off I go. So I was never sort of blocked or stopped, which meant a lot to me, really. I mean, because at the end of the day, you approach managers and you approach, try to approach rock stars, but they don't know me from Adam, they don't know who I am, so why should they? So I'm very aware of that side of things, but I'm also just so grateful for the people who did speak to me, because they do, as you say, that that extra level of detail and sort of behind the scenes magic is just lovely. But also I go into my research. I love the research part of writing books. One of my favorite parts of it, going into kind of archives and just seeing. It's a bit like being a detective, really. I think I got in a detective that I am a Scorpio, so we are supposed to be quite good detectives. So in another life, maybe I would have been Poirot or something like that.
And I love that, because you weren't out to badger anyone in the Fleetwood Mac world. It was telling the truth, but in a way of like empathy with them, because of what they were going through. Every member of Fleetwood Mac was going through stuff, but it wasn't like you were trying to say, oh, and they did this much coke and they did this much, pot, and they drank, and it was there. We all know it was there, and we all know the repercussions, but you weren't out to hammer that point that the reason that they had the problems they had was because of their drug use. And I really appreciated that, because having read so many books on them, I mean, even Mick's book himself, his was way graphic. I mean, he was very honest about what had gone on in there, from his perspective. What I thought was great about your book, it was more like about them as people who was, showed empathy for their situations. And I could see how much you love them all, like not just her, but that you really loved each and every one of them. And so, like you said, Stevie fans, like we're tough. Like we know that there were things that happened, and we know that she got caught up in stuff, and we knew about her addictions, but we're also very sympathetic to her for overcoming and moving on. And so we have that like little we're a little protective of her.
Of course, and I love that. And I think when you're writing a biography, you've always got to think about who you're writing it for. Who is this really for? Yes, you're writing it about someone, and there's that to be considered. But also, you're writing it for the fans of that person. And so, what do they want? How do they feel? As you say, protective. They feel protective over Stevie Nicks, and I do too. I felt that very much so. So yes, I'm glad you felt that way, and I do always come from a place of empathy, I hope, but and a tremendous sort of affection. I sometimes you sort of feel like, because I have got a kind of British sense of humour, which is slightly dark, a bit irreverent, and sometimes I hope that travels okay. Sometimes maybe it doesn't, but it's always coming from my point of view from a place of affectionate irreverence rather than kind of anything more than that. But with the drugs thing, you're right. I mean, we all know about that. It's not a surprise. And I think that kind of took the heat off me as a biographer, because it's like, look, we all know this. So, of course, I'm going to mention it, but, this is no surprise. This is not something that was hidden. I think, Stevie's always been very open about it, extremely honest. And I always really respected that as well, because that's how I think she's helped a lot of other people who've gone through similar problems with substance abuse, or with those sorts of issues and associated issues that come as a result of those things. Her kind of honesty about that, I think has been, provided a lot of strength for other people. So I have huge respect for that. But also, the amount of cocaine use in that Fleetwood Mac story is obviously prodigious. So you can't not go there. And I tried to sort of treat it with a sort of at times, where appropriate, a kind of slight
Yeah.
wry amusement. But because it's like, look, we all know
No,
this.
I think you did. It was kind of like in an amusing kind of like, and of course, there's that was going on. I mean, that may have not helped the album go quite as fast as it should have gone, or, but you always kind of stuck it in as kind of an aside, like, well,
Yes.
the album took longer than it should have, but things were happening, and but
People do, they kind of glorify drug use as well, and I think, I'm not
right,
interested in glorifying the use of drugs. I think, when you've, especially with, as I say, Stevie Nicks fans, Fleetwood Mac fans, they all know the story. They don't need that kind of thing glorifying. They understood what happened, and they're more interested in the more kind of more interesting things, like the kind of creativity. And I think that's where, Stevie Nicks for me is such an interesting character. Yes, she's this rock and roll goddess, and she's fantastic, and that's a wonderful
right.
thing, and I love that. And she's hugely charismatic, and she's incredible on stage, and she's all of those things. At the same time, I suppose for me, the thing that my kind of heart connects with is this incredible commitment to creativity and her art. And she never compromised on that. And she, I found that really beautiful, not just in terms of music, but her poetry, the way she kind of collaged lyrics together, the writing process, the way she, she's an artist as well, the paintings that she did, and the kind of sources of inspiration for her. I found that a very interesting part of her story, which I hadn't really heard particularly before. So I really enjoyed going down those kind of Stevie Nicks rabbit holes. Um,
Absolutely.
and her magic, she's a magical being, Stevie Nicks.
And you know what? For everyone out there who has never watched Silver Spring live, 1997 live concert, she does not help anyone get away from the Lindsay things, because when you watch her face while she's singing Silver Spring, you're like, oh my God, she so loved him. She still like loves him. So there is that too. Like they knew how to get that on stage chemistry that had all of us be like, well, how could you look at her like that? Or sometimes he would glare, in the old days, you watch some of the old live concerts when things weren't so well, and then when things were good, it's almost like you could see it play out over the years if you watched enough of them like I do. But that's why I loved when you started the book out with that, because I was like, that just captures their relationship. It's just, you got to watch it. I can't describe it enough. You just have to
It's
watch
such a moment. It is such a moment. And how unusual as well to be able to look at a group like Fleetwood Mac, who've had this incredibly long career already up to that point, So
it. Right.
97, we're talking about, that's quite late on in the Fleetwood Mac story.
Yeah.
And they were kind of reuniting, like it was sort of an MTV kind of special. And to have a moment that is so potent in a band's story that actually is, a good 30 years into their story essentially, is very unusual. But I remember watching that at the time, so I'd have been in my late
Me
teens,
too.
and I
Me too.
couldn't believe what was happening. It was just, I don't think I'd ever seen anything quite like that happen on stage. It was like they were, I mean, of course they were talking to each other with those songs as they always had done, but there was this other level of emotional resonance, and the way Silver Springs, it's the perfect example. The way she's just delivering that straight to Lindsay. Never mind the audience. This is, it's almost like not a curse, but it's like a kind of, she is delivering this message to him, and it is so compelling. I think it's one of the most compelling moments in in rock and roll, really, because it's just, oh wow, it just, you can't kind of, it's an unforgettable moment. So I had to kind of, in a way, open the book with that moment, because I just, it made such an impression on me, and I'm sure so many other people, because it's like, what is happening? Oh my God.
I always felt bad for anyone who would have, well, okay, he was married to that woman for 20 years. And you think that is his, like, when you're with someone and you're like, oh, your ex, and she's like somebody, and you don't really have to know her or face her. Oh, no, when you're Lindsey Buckingham's girl, you got Stevie Nicks right there. I mean, I always felt bad for anybody who dated him. I was like, you would not want to come up against her. So.
Hard act to follow, I think, Stevie Nicks, absolutely, yeah. But in a way, I mean, I really kind of felt for them having to kind of relive that sort of psychodrama after splitting up, for years on stage, how hard that must have been for them. I mean, obviously interesting from a, an outsider's point of view,
Right.
but for them it must have been
But a
terribly
human.
hard.
Yeah, that's what I thought you captured so well. And even Christine McVie and
Oh,
John, like they were too. I mean,
yeah.
even though theirs wasn't as upfront, you knew what she was going through. And another thing, I see I could do this for hours, but I'm watching time and I'm like, but I thought what you did so well was explain the relationship between Stevie and Christine because I hadn't read a lot about it. I now, when I watch the videos, I do see a connection with them that I hadn't really seen before. I was like, well, of course, I didn't know how Christine, who you're standing next to her. I mean, you got Stevie right there. How is that? But she held her own and she wrote great music and they were friends. And I love that you really showed us like women that stuck together and they weren't like battling for songs and they weren't battling for attention.
I mean, what a great example, because the thing is, that's something I'm glad you picked up on, because for me, I just thought, you know what, there's lots of relationships going on in Fleetwood Mac. I think that the most successful relationship in Fleetwood Mac is Christine and Stevie. That's the most enduring relationship because they were each other's strengths. And there is always this cliche that people have in their minds that if you have more than one woman in a band, that they're naturally going to be at each other's throats, which is just not true, and it's so ridiculous. And I think there's a sort of a temptation for people to kind of fetishize
Yeah.
what they think it's like between women in a band. And I'm a musician. I've been in lots of bands with women, with guys. To me, it just isn't that. But it's an outsider kind of point of view where people go, "Oh, I bet they're having cat fights all the time." It's like, we have to get over that because it's so ridiculous.
Exactly.
And I think what helped, and I think they talked about this themselves quite a bit, was that they are so different in character, in the way they present themselves. They're so different that it was going to work. I think if they were too similar, maybe it
Yeah.
might have been a different story. But there was no kind of jockeying for position because they both had such distinct strengths. Christine was obviously already in Fleetwood Mac. She was, already kind of a strong part of that band. And I think, yeah, their differences probably brought them together and helped them kind of find a sort of understanding within that kind of crazy rock and roll world.
I thought you did a great job with that. I love that. If they ever get back together, well, I don't even know. Is Fleetwood Mac, are they back together?
I should know. I lose track. It just
You know what?
seems
I do too, because after a while, it's like together, not together. I know they just settled a lawsuit with Lindsay.
right,
There's a
right.
lawsuit going on. They just settled. And I actually think that there's going to be something coming up. I don't know. I saw an interview with him, but I don't know. Who knows? I think until they can't get on stage anymore, like there will be reunions, right?
Yes. I think it's one of those can't live with each other, can't live
Yeah.
without
Oh,
story,
thank you
basically.
so much, Zoe. This was so much fun. I love being able to reread your book and I love being able to talk to you. You made my day.
Oh, likewise. It's been fantastic to talk to you, Michelle. Thank you so much.
And if anything ever happens, I know who to call. I know I got your email. I'm going to email you. We'll talk. Okay.
Anytime.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.